Welcome, everybody, to our Beyond Sundays podcast. I'm Peter Bay, and I'm here with another parenting podcast episode. Today, I have with me the amazing, the wonderful Lorelle Mueting. And Lorelle, you're at Heartland Family Service. Tell us your role there, what that looks like, and that'll kind of set the stage for what we're going to talk about today. And I'll tell you that in a second. So, Lorelle.
Okay. All right. Well, thanks so much for having me. I appreciate it. I'm the prevention director at Heartland Family Service, and I've been with Heartland for 17 years. And so I oversee all of the substance abuse and problem gambling prevention that we do in the community. We work in both Iowa and Nebraska. We have 17 different locations in Southeast Iowa or Southwest Iowa and Southeast Nebraska. And so I oversee all of the prevention that we do in the community. So what does my day look like? It depends on every day. We do a lot of work in middle schools with students working. We have an evidence-informed and research-based program that we use to talk with students about choices and addiction and how it happens and how when I make high-risk choices with drugs and alcohol, I put things that are important to me at risk. And it's not because I'm a bad person. It's not, because I deserve to lose things. It's just that high-risk choices put things that are important to me at risk. And so how can I prevent myself from making high-risk choices? And how can I protect the things that are important to me? So we do a lot of work in middle schools with that, talking about choices and how addiction happens and different substances and how they affect the body differently. And so that's just a part of what I do. Right now, a lot of what I do is also working with legislators. So we work with legislators on both sides of the river and at the federal level, trying to help them understand what kind of policies promote addiction and what kind of policies prevent people from having problems with addiction. And so right now is a really busy time for us because both Iowa and Nebraska are in session. So we're trying to track policies and connect with legislators to provide them education so they can make important decisions that protect all Iowans and all Nebraskans.
Right. So you, early on, you said there were like two things. You said it was it substance something and then gambling? What were those two things again?
Substance abuse and problem gambling. Substance
abuse and problem gambling. And targeting any age or predominantly towards youth or what?
Any age. We serve the lifespan. And so, we want to prevent people. I mean, my whole goal of the work that I do and my team does is to prevent people from having problems with substance abuse and problem gambling.
And you get into schools, you talk to a lot of students, and you're talking to them about primarily those things, or what are other things that you talk to students about? Yeah,
we do. I mean, and so with the problem gambling kind of area, that's where kind of screen time and cell phones and that kind of stuff falls into sports betting and, online betting and all that kind of stuff falls into the problem gambling prevention that we do. Most people, when they hear problem gambling, they think about casinos.
Right.
But we all have a casino in our hand every day.
So today our episode's going to it's got the title of Sex, Drugs, and Rock and Roll. I don't think that's used as much. When I was a kid in the late 80s, early 90s, it was all like sex, drugs, and rock and roll. And it was this crazy, evil thing. And but parenting really amid temptations that our kids are facing and what that looks like. So it's been interesting in like the 90s and early 2000s. There were certain risk things that just kept seeming to go up and up, and then they kind of it would roller coaster around, and then maybe about 10 years ago, some of the numbers for dangerous activities, behaviors, it seemed as though they were starting to decline. But you're saying that that's not the case anymore, that COVID had something to do with that. Just talk to us about that, dangerous activities, and what things are back on the incline, and like what is that?
Yeah, and so I think pre-COVID, in reality, we were seeing youth binge drinking numbers going down, underage drinking going down. We put a lot of focus on preventing underage drinking, and we had some really nice restrictions, with the alcohol industry prior to COVID. But once COVID hit, we're seeing those numbers go up. I think not only in youth, but in adults. Adults, I think, drank their way through the pandemic, and I think our youth vaped their way through the pandemic. We're seeing huge increases in mental health concerns, suicide concerns, and just substance use in general, not just alcohol or vaping. Marijuana use is drastically on the rise, THC use, all kinds of THC use, including all the stuff that you see advertised down the street from our church.
Right.
So all of those things are back kind of on the rise. And when you add, increases in mental health concerns, then more substance use happens because people are self-medicating. Like nobody wants to feel bad. Nobody wants to feel sad, depressed, anxious. And so, I talk with youth a lot about this. There's this huge misconception that if I have depression or if I'm sad, I just need to use because it'll help me feel better. Mm-hmm. And the problem is long-term research shows that use can cause depression, whether it's THC, whether it's alcohol, whether it's nicotine. Those types of things add to depression. And I might feel better while I'm under the influence, but when I'm done being under the influence, my depression is still there. My problems are still there. And so those are really huge reasons, I think, why young people start is because they have some kind of underlying mental health concern, or maybe it's not depression, but it's just they need somebody to talk to. They don't have very good coping skills. And so we need to develop those things to help prevent some of the mental health and substance misuse.
So, just right off the bat, as a parent of a 8, 6, and 4-year-old, I'm like, what to do with this? How can I parent in this landscape? And that's what we're going to hopefully dive into today and leave with some practical tools to help us. So the reality is, even though some of those statistics were changing, they've kind of come back up, and in other areas more so than others. I know. Honestly, I'm sure I was part of the statistic for alcohol sales during the pandemic because I hardly drink at all. And then someone introduced me to that Toys R Us that's now an alcohol store. And I bought all these hilarious, fruity flavored alcohols that are just sitting in a cabinet. And so I could see how that could have really changed during the pandemic. But as parents, it sounds like we might have felt like, we're starting to get a grip on some of these things. But now it feels like maybe we don't. Are you seeing that to be true with your work, your job?
Yeah, absolutely. I think, I think where we're at is that it's really it's all fun and games, right? When you talk about the marketing, these companies, the tobacco industry spends $1 billion an hour marketing its dangerous and deadly product. So when we talk about our kids being bombarded, so are we as parents. We're bombarded and we're with marketing that it's okay, that it's fun, that it's this, that it's that. And it can be. And it's all fun and games until someone has a problem, right? And they can't stop. And that's where then it becomes, well, you're a bad person, just control yourself. And so I think understanding addiction is really the key. And understanding how it happens to prevent people from getting to the point where they can't stop anymore. And it's not fun and games.
Right. So as a parent, and we have parents of all different ages listening to this podcast, some with young kids who aren't even, don't even know the difference between water and alcohol yet. Some with teenagers who are right in the thick of it, and some with older kids, and they've gone through this, or maybe they have an older kid who's in an addiction of some sort, and maybe they too are in an addiction of some sort. How can we as adults who maybe feel like it's too late for me start to what is our on-ramp for healthy behaviors?
Yeah, good question. I think talking about with your kids, talking about it. Sometimes I think parents have this fear that, if I talk about it, then they're going to do it. Right. And so it's about starting to have those conversations at whatever age about, and we use the term low risk and high risk, not healthy or unhealthy, good or bad.
Oh,
because the healthy, unhealthy, good, bad, they bring judgment into it, right?
Okay.
Low risk and high risk is based on research. And there is a low risk amount of alcohol that I can drink based on research. And there is a high risk amount,
Right.
And so all of that's based on research rather than how I feel about it, right?
That's so good. So like authenticity here. So do you drink?
I do not anymore.
So you cut it out entirely.
I did. And that's because my dad died of colon cancer when he was 50. I did drink. I drank in college. I drank when I was not supposed to drink. But my dad, I was 23 when my dad died. And I drank after that. But alcohol is linked causally to 7 different types of cancer. And so there's a lot of research that shows that alcohol causes different types of cancers. And so colon cancer is one of those. And for me, it's not worth it to drink anymore. So that's the main reason why. It's not because I'm a teetotaler or I'm anti-alcohol. That's not the case. That's a personal reason for me because of my health. And I don't want to die when I'm 50. I don't want to get colon cancer. And so that's just one of the choices that I made to protect things that are important to me.
So, low risk, high risk, those are such good words for us to use. So I want to remove that condemnation of healthy, unhealthy, good, bad. But low risk. So I still drink. I've never drank a lot. I grew up with some alcohol abuse around me, not my parents, but some other relatives, and I just disdained it. I mean, I didn't even want it at our wedding. We ended up having a few options, but people I even got up and told people don't abuse this because then I won't have a good time. And people were super respectable. But so I do drink. What, as an adult and wanting to remain low risk, what should that be for me?
Well, so it's the NIAAA, the National Institute of Alcohol Abuse. And I don't know, I'd have to look up the NIAAA and what that stands for, but they have some guidelines that are low risk drinking guidelines based on research. And for women, it's 3 or less a day would be considered low risk. And men is 4 or less a day would be considered low risk. And a lot of times I always say you can't save those up. Right. There's a weekly amount too. And I think I don't have it memorized off the top of my head because normally it's in a PowerPoint and I'm talking about it and it triggers me. But so whatever the week, there's a weekly amount too.
Okay.
So 7, if it's 7 drinks a week, that would be considered low risk. You can't save all your 7 up and have 7 on one day or whatever.
So if I just stick to 3 a day, it's not like if I do 3 a day every day, that's 21. That's probably still high risk.
Yes, that would still be high risk. Yes, because there's a weekly limit. I can look it up if you want me to.
Yeah, do it right now. Oh, this is good stuff. The distance between knowing and not knowing has never been shorter with smartphones. It's incredible. When I was a kid, it was someone would be like, how old is the dad from the Little House on the Prairie? How old was he when he died? And none of us knew until you found a book that talked about whoever that guy was with the wonderful hair, Michael Landon, I think his name was. And then you're like, wow, he died young. Nowadays, we just look it up.
So it's the National Institute on Alcohol Abuse and Alcoholism.
Okay.
Is what the NIAAA stands for.
So Lorelle, if I am, you said low risk for a male, it's 4 drinks or less in a day.
Yep.
Does that mean that I can 4 times 7 is 20 something? I'm not great with math. And so can I am I good with that or how does that look?
No. So the guidelines are for men, no more than 4 if I'm drinking daily.
Okay.
And then no more than 14 if I'm drinking weekly.
Okay.
So those numbers aren't, like you said, interchangeable. I can't save up and drink 21, and I also can't save them all up and drink 14 in a day. Again, I can, but that's not considered low risk. Right? Those would be high risk choices, and that's just what they are because they're high risk based on research.
Right. Because they lead to addiction or because they lead to wild behavior or what?
So we call those health problems and impairment problems. So health problems being addiction being one of them, depression, anxiety, some of those mental health problems, but also physical health problems like liver damage, heart disease, diabetes, things like that. So health problems versus impairment problems. We call those impairment problems would be things like car crashes, DUIs, jail, losing jobs, losing family, losing trust, those kind of things. So that's what, when we're talking about what's low risk and what's high risk,
yes.
Impairment or intoxication or being high is always going to be high risk, not because it's wrong, not because it's unhealthy, because it's high risk for impairment problems, right? It's high risk for car crashes, DUIs, all of those kind of things. And I can't change that. Again, it doesn't matter who I am, how good of a person I am. High risk choices and impairment is always going to be high risk.
Right. So as a parent, this is good for me to know, not so I can be just like bound to the law of like, I must stay under this number, but also if I stay in low risk behaviors, I'll probably be showing my kids the best side of me more often.
Absolutely. And I think sometimes these things are hard to hear because maybe I'm not making low risk choices based on this research, but that was never my intent, right? I mean, I think that's the problem that we have, we have these for-profit industries that are based on addiction. The alcohol industry is one of them. They don't make their money off of people who drink in low-risk amounts. The alcohol industry makes their money off of the people who cannot stop using their product, right? And so thinking about the term drink responsibly, that's an alcohol coined term.
Every ad.
And so what does that mean? Drink responsibly, what do they say? If you're drinking responsibly, that means you have a designated driver.
Oh, there you go. Got
yeah.
It. Oh, this is like a church where the pastor's like, and then the Lord said, and everyone, I'm like, I get so stressed out. I just want to blurt something out and I never get it right. So yeah, designated driver. That makes sense. I knew that.
Right. But if I drink responsibly and have a designated driver, that's absolutely a responsible driving choice, right? Then I'm going to be making a low-risk driving choice. But am I probably going to be making a low-risk drinking choice if I have a designated driver? So those are two separate things that the alcohol industry has tried to confuse, right? So I'm always going to be in favor of having a designated driver 110%. But that probably means I'm going to be making high-risk drinking choices, which lead to impairment and health problems, or can lead to, right?
So this is felt more so like a conversation for adults, for things like high risk, like with alcohol and drugs. When do we start the conversation with our kids?
As young as you can. I mean, and obviously you're not talking about it in the same way.
Okay.
But talking about addiction at a young age, I mean, I think Emma was probably, I don't know, she might've been in kindergarten and she was riding in the car with my brother. And when they got home, wherever they were going, he goes, "What are you talking? Like, how did Emma saw somebody smoking?" And she was like, "Uncle," because that's what they call my brother. "Uncle, that person is smoking. They have an addiction and they can't stop." Right. And so talking to kids about, because they notice those things, right? So talking about and not, villainizing it. They're not a bad person. It's just that addiction happens, and nicotine is one of the most addictive substances, right? People wouldn't use it if they could stop, right? Most people want to stop. And so I think it's just about having those conversations really, really early. Aubrey, I think she was maybe 3. We were saying prayers and stuff before bed. And she said, I have no idea. These are just conversations that we had organically. It wasn't forced. It was them noticing things. And I think she was about 3. And she said, "Mama, 1 beer is too many and 99's not enough."
What? Was this a t-shirt she saw or something?
I have no idea. She was 3. I have no idea. And so then just really having those conversations that, can be high risk for people. And so I think it's just really important to talk with kids, especially when if you don't know what to say, "I don't really know what to say, but I like that you asked me about this, and, let's find out the answer together. What do you think?" I mean, wow. I think that's really powerful too. There's a study that shows that the power of parents is that, let me make sure I say this the right way.
Yeah, we're going to fact check this for sure.
Kids who learn a lot about the risks of substance use from their parents are 50% less likely to misuse substances.
Wow.
But then when we ask the kids if they learned a lot, less than 30% of them said that they learned a lot from their parents.
Okay.
And so the power of parents is huge. And we don't have to have all the right answers because we have resources to get the right answers and have the conversation. So I think it's really important to open up the lines of communication early and often, especially because kids notice things. They notice when people are smoking or they notice if people are vaping. And so it's really talking about, and I think explaining it in the simplest terms of addiction from the very beginning is important. Because it normalizes addiction.
Right. Okay.
And doesn't vilify it.
Okay. Difference between normalizing a discussion about it and not vilifying it. That's huge. So you said earlier that that parents who do talk about it with their kids, 50% of them of those kids make better choices. Is there a statistic about like parents who don't talk about it, then they're highly more likely to get into
I don't know that there's
high-risk behavior?
I don't know that there's a statistic about that.
So 50% of the families who talk about, but only 30% of families are talking about it. I actually was good at math. So that means that 15% or less of parents are talking about these things with their kids. So 85% of parents don't even get into the conversation. 15% of parents are talking about it as being positive. That's it. So 85% of parents are not having a positive effect with their kids with high-risk behaviors, discussing that.
And I think it's important, too, to set boundaries, especially with, as kids get older. I was on a webinar yesterday for a long time, but there was they were talking about the not average age of use, but when it's appropriate to start screening kids. And now, according to yesterday's webinar, the age of 9 is when we should be asking kids about substance use.
What does that look like?
That's a good question. I don't know. I think they're talking about for professionals, right? And so screening tools with at doctors' offices and health visits and, well check visits and things like that. So that's, at the age of 9,
wow.
because kids they're using younger.
That's wild. So what if I suspect that my kids, because I have an 8, 6, and 4-year-old, so it's wild to think that that by next year I need to have my eye on it and be diligent about that. But what if I suspect that my kids or their friends are getting involved in these high-risk behaviors? How do I approach these conversations?
Well, I think, again, it's going to depend on age, right? And so, there are lots of different, I think the first step is really just talking with your kid about it, especially like adolescents, and really listening and letting them know, like, you're not going to get in trouble based on your answer, but I need an honest and open conversation about this, whatever your answer is, and then we can figure out how to move forward from there. I mean, that's one of the things that we talk about, especially in middle school, talking about really being able to have some kind of an adult in your life that you trust. And like, my kids have a code word. And so if they're in a situation that, like, maybe they're at a party and there's alcohol there and they don't feel comfortable, they know they can text me this code word and I will pick them up where they're at, wherever, whenever, without any questions. And once they get in the car, then we can talk about the rest of it. Right.
Wow. Yeah.
And so I think it's really important to set boundaries with your kids like that. In having these kind of conversations. This is my expectation for you, right? Is that, you're not my expectation is that you're not drinking alcohol until you're 21 because that's the legal age, right? That would be a low risk choice. Once I'm 21, I'm of age and there's no legal ramifications, right? And so that's my expectation. So I think setting expectations for kids is really important. And a lot of people say, well, I made high risk choices when I was a kid and
Look at me.
That's right. I'm fine.
I'm doing great.
Right. But then this is what I ask the kids all the time when I'm talking with them. And I always say, so is it logical for me to think that just because I made high risk choices when I was a kid and I turned out fine, that if my kids make high risk choices, that they're going to be fine because I was fine? Like, that's not logical. Right. And so I think it's, being realistic about expectations and boundaries. I mean, there are lots of situations that I was in that I wouldn't want my kids in. Right. And so it's being honest about that. It's not really telling war stories or, oh yeah, this one time, whatever. Not like that, but saying, here are the things that I did. And maybe not in detail, but like saying, hey, I made these high risk choices and I would prefer that you didn't because you're going to be safer if you don't. Right.
Yeah. And depending on the age, I think that there's a lot of parents who just don't want to tell their kids about the things that they got into, whether it was sex, alcohol, drugs in their young years, because they're afraid it's going to open the door to kids being like, well, you didn't.
Yep.
Maybe I should do it.
Yep.
But then as those kids get older and now they're adults, if they find out as an adult that mom or dad did these things, it also feels like, why didn't you ever talk to me about that? Yeah. And so that honesty
with boundaries.
With boundaries, yeah. Unpack that a little bit. Honesty with boundaries.
Well, again, I think it's not necessarily sharing all of the, juicy details.
Okay.
Because I think probably most parents have things that they would not, they would undo those choices, right? If there are, if I could undo some of the choices I made, I would certainly do that. When I got my first job in prevention, I felt like, why didn't anyone, like I just sat there, like when I went to this training to learn how to talk about all these things, I just thought, why didn't anyone tell me this?
Yeah.
Like, if I had known what I know now after sitting through 5 days of training, I would have made totally different choices. Right. And so I think most of us have those. Some of them are more serious than others, but there are lots of things that I would undo. Lots of times I wasn't really proud of the choices I made. Right.
Yeah.
And so I think it's sharing that with humility and with sincerity.
Yeah.
So without getting into the juicy details.
So I'm going to take a little pause here to give kind of some of the practical points checkpoint here of things that I've already learned in this podcast that I really hadn't thought about prior. One, it's earlier you said to not necessarily like with my 4-year-old, I don't need to just like jumpstart this conversation about weed with her, but with my 8-year-old, he might bring it up. And when they notice it or bring it up, or I catch them staring at someone who's staggering on the sidewalk, like those are the times, the organic times to talk to my kid about it.
We call those teachable moments.
Excellent. So that's one practical thing is allow those moments, like don't force it in, but as they come, take advantage of them.
Yep.
Another practical thing was something you said about a safe word with your kids. If they text it to you, you just go and get them, and you don't criticize them or guilt them. You pick them up, and then you talk about it later on the way home or whenever they're ready to talk about it. So that's a really good practical tool. And then the other thing that we were just talking about, being honest with boundaries, not getting into all the salacious details of me and your Uncle Frank did this and that and whatever, but more so being honest about like, yeah, I did have a lot of high risk, whether that's in sex or drugs or alcohol. And this is how it really affected my life.
Right.
And this is why I'm for you, and I want you to know that and make better decisions for yourself.
Because ultimately that's what it's about, right? Kids don't want to be told what to do.
Yeah,
and so
me neither.
Yeah, no one does, right? And so that's how we approach all the work that we do. Is this isn't about me telling you not to use drugs or that alcohol is bad or whatever. This is about me, us having a conversation so that you have all the information that you need to make important decisions, right? Because ultimately, the only one who's going to be able to make those decisions for the kids is themselves, right? And so I want you to have all of the information and consider all of these other things, so you can make decisions that protect things that are important to you.
So when I was a kid in school, I had dare to keep a kid off drugs. And I think that there were some parents who were just like, okay, good. They're talking about it in school. They're doing that job. I don't have to do that job. Is there anything in school like that? You're going to schools, so maybe I don't even have to talk to my kids, right? Lorelle, can you just do this for all of us? Is that how it works? Talk to me about that.
No, because prevention is pretty comprehensive. And so, DARE, the way it was delivered when it was first introduced, what we found was that it wasn't super effective. However, there are places that still use DARE, and it's been revamped. I think the thing is, like, a lot of adults that I work with, they think prevention is just telling kids don't do it, and then like just say no. Well, that's not that easy, unfortunately. I mean, our kids are bombarded with peer pressure, media, music. Think about the music that we listen to. It's all full of drug and alcohol, right? So it's like they're bombarded with this message to use, and then somebody's coming to their school and saying don't use.
Yeah.
Right? And so it's not that simple when everywhere else you turn, everyone's using, or that's what it feels like, right? That might not be the case.
Right.
And actually it's not, because the good news is most kids are not making high risk choices. But that's not always how it feels because of our society.
So you're telling me that the school systems aren't just taking care of this job for us. This is our job as parents.
Yeah, no. I'm sorry.
Yep. No, it's.
And some schools do, like health. Health. They talk about it in health. So schools approach it, as best as they can.
Right.
But it's definitely not the place that all of the education should happen. It has to be ongoing conversations.
So what are other practical tools that we as parents can have? Because this conversation can feel hopeless at times. But what are some practical tools to help us as parents in this conversation of sex, drugs, rock and roll, temptations all around us and our kids?
So I think, learning the facts, knowing what is out in our community is really important also. It can be kind of scary, but knowing what is happening and what is trending is important, because then you can have those kind of conversations. So I think that's really important. And then, again, just being open and honest, and really listen, instead of always having something to say. Like, I want to hear what my kids are experiencing, what they're seeing, what questions they have.
Right.
And I've told my kids from the very beginning, as soon as they could understand this, you have to tell me everything. I don't care if you think you're going to get in trouble. We'll talk about the trouble part later, but I want you to know that I'm here for you for anything. It doesn't matter if you think I'm going to be mad, then that's something you should definitely tell me because we need to talk about it. Right.
Yeah.
So I think it's just from an early age, just they know that you have their back, right? And if they ask me a question that I don't know the answer to, I will say, I don't know, but it's a really good question, and we'll see if we can find it out.
I think the way we talk about our kids too, with them and around them, really matters. If we're honoring them, if you go in the backyard and your neighbor says something, well, just wait till they're teenagers. Life is terrible then. And we don't use that type of behavior. We say, no, my kid's a teenager and she's amazing. And you know what she's doing with softball? Do you know what she's doing with academics? Do you know what she's doing with music? Do you know, we cheer them on, we encourage them, we speak about them honorably. And then we also speak honestly about our misgivings. And I think it gives kids, they see more that love and respect of each other. And helps us to dive into tougher conversations. There's teamaccess.org. It's team@access.org, something called a culture translator. And you mentioned like just know what's trending.
Mm-hmm.
This is something that I'm on. And so like just this week, I got an email, 3 things this week. Trade wife life. This is something that's trending, and it just explains what it is. And time's ticking, another thing that's trending, and what it is, and socially fit. And it just kind of fits. It filled me in on these 3 topics.
Oh.
And these are things that your kids may know about, and just so you can understand what's going on.
Yeah, you'll have to send that to me.
I will. It's the song of the week is on there. It's Flowers by Miley Cyrus. So you can see what that is. And then it gives a translation about each of these different topics and just what you, and not every one of them is like something destructive or whatever, but they're things to just help you know what's popular right now. The culture translator at team@access.org is where you can find this. Subscribe. It's a free thing to get all this kind of stuff. There was one about like the Liver King. I don't know if you heard about that guy. He's like this super strong guy who like just ate animal livers, and he claimed he was so strong from that. And then he found out, like, of course, he's on super steroids. So that was one of them. And the stuff that we as parents, because we're so busy in our jobs and whatever, if we have young kids, Coco Melon, it's a way that we can kind of stay in tune with what our teens and our kids as they get older are learning about. I think you mentioned the music. Like, holy cow, the music we're listening to matters.
It does.
And so for me as a Christian, it's like, am I filling up my heart and my mind and my ears with things that are glorifying, edifying, something that's going to point me towards Jesus and what he's done for me and the promises that he has for me? Or am I filling up my mind with lyrics of songs that are definitely not that are full of all these high-risk behaviors and, in fact, glorify them? Right. And then what do I have on when I'm around my kids?
Right. Yep. I think those are all really practical tools also. And, we talk a little bit about that with students and, talk about how, the music that we listen to really normalizes those high-risk behaviors, and it makes it seem like everyone's doing it. And in reality, that's not the case. Mm-hmm. And then I always say, hey, have any of you ever gotten a song stuck in your head? Right. And so that's just another reminder where you're getting normalized behaviors on repeat. Right. And so, I say you do not have to listen to classical music with no lyrics. Like, that's not what I'm saying. Right. But I'm saying that being aware of how this affects people and subliminally, right? Because marketing is a science, right? And music is kind of a way of marketing, right? And people go to school for 4 or plus years to learn how to market to people, right?
Yep.
And so I think a lot of us as adults say, well, that doesn't affect me. Like, I'm not swayed by marketing, but I mean, we all are, right?
Totally. Man, I went to Burger King just this week. Whopper, 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 Whopper. And it wasn't even that delicious. My kids didn't mind it, but I wouldn't have gone there if not for that amazing Whopper song.
Yeah.
So, yeah. So, you have a couple resources, also a Lifesavers Guide, American Foundation for Suicide Prevention. Before we wrap up with this, tell me a little bit about that. How can we as parents be knowledgeable about that?
Well, I think, Nebraska just rolled out the 988 suicide prevention hotline. And so that's always going to be a resource. Super easy to remember. You don't have to, it's 988. And I think that's really important. And the thing that I want people to know and understand about these helplines that we're going to talk about, it's not like you don't have to worry about calling. I call these places all the time and ask them questions. So there's a tobacco quit line that I use a lot. It's called My Life, My Quit. I call them all the time and say, hey, what is this? What happens in this situation when a teen calls and blah, 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 so.
Oh, so parents can just call and say if they're like, my kid's been acting weird.
Yes.
And they're kind of depressed. I can call 988 and say, hey, I've noticed these things with my kids. What should I do?
Right. And so these counselors that are answering this phone, they're trained to, if it's not a crisis, then they'll put you on the non-crisis line, right?
Okay.
If it is a crisis, they'll take care of that. And so I think don't be scared to call. Well, I don't know if this is a crisis. Okay. If you have a question about things, there's another helpline rather than 988. It's called the Nebraska Family Helpline on the Nebraska side of the river. And that number is 888-866-8660. And 24/7, they answer all kinds of questions that you might have. Whether it's, I think my kid might be drinking, I think my child is depressed, whatever. They are available 24/7 on the Nebraska side of the river. On the Iowa side of the river, it would be Your Life Iowa.
Okay.
So you just Google Your Life Iowa, and it's the same thing. You'll get somebody 24/7,
Wow.
and they will direct you to these places. If you don't want to call, most of these places have websites where you can chat with someone 24/7. So they have, it. And so I think it's really important to have those resources. I have them in my phone so that I give them out whenever people, need them.
That's brilliant, because remembering those numbers, it's not
hard.
Happen.
Yeah.
So save it in your
Contacts.
phone and your contacts.
Yep.
And if you as a parent are hearing this and being like, the more I hear this, the more I just know that I'm not equipped to be doing this. Well, the reality is no.
Nobody
we're not.
is.
None of us are.
No.
And to know that actually helps. And biblically, it's like, when I am weak, then he is strong. And when we know that we have misgivings and we're sinful, then we have to rely on God to fill those in. And likewise, here in some of these issues, there are services to help us.
Absolutely.
And so when we have those questions, like, I'm busy doing my job, I don't know all these things.
Right.
They can help me with it. So even if it's not an emergency, or if I need to learn something, or I'm suspecting something, or if it is an emergency, I can call those numbers and I shouldn't feel guilty about it.
No, not at all, because that's what they're trained to do. I mean, these folks are 100% trained, competent. They deal with this on a daily basis. And so there's no judgment. It's just help.
What final encouragement would you give to parents on this topic of high-risk behavior, sex, drugs, rock and roll?
I think really it comes down to communication and monitoring, right? And so knowing where your kids are at, knowing who they're with, knowing those people's parents, but also communicating, being open and honest with your kids and really listening to their responses. I think those are the biggest things that we can do as parents to just really build in that trust.
Yeah.
I mean, I want my kids to know that I trust them, but I also want them to know that I'm gonna be in their business.
Yeah.
My job is not to be their friend. My job is to be in their business and help them, grow and be successful adults.
And the reality, in the teenage years and the young pre-teenage years, those are some incredibly formational years in kids. They're also the years where kids start to push away from their parents a bit. And as parents, we cannot just receive that stiff arm and run away or get into our cell phones or whatever it is. This is a time when we need to intentionally find ways to still be involved.
Yeah, and to connect.
Work at the concession stands of their game, attend their things, get on the committees, not so that you're all up in their business, but so that you're around them and cheering them on, and you see their friends and you meet their friends' parents. And surprise, surprise, the kingdom of God's all about relationships. And so this will also help to keep things in the light. In him there is no darkness at all. And so God desires for the truth to shine forth. And these are ways that we can help that happen with our teens. Lorelle, thank you so much for joining me on this topic on another edition of Beyond Sunday Parenting Podcast. I'm excited to have you on future episodes.
Thank you. Thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
All right.